Welcome to Weight Loss and Wellness for Real, the podcast where people like you get the practical solutions and support you need to permanently lose the physical and mental weight so you can feel better and live the life you want in the body and mind you want. If you're looking to overcome your stress eating, overeating, binging behaviors, and move to a place of freedom with food and your body, you're in the right place. I wanted to add one quick thing before we get started. I'm listening to some of the financial struggles out there, and I get it. So if you are a podcast listener, I am offering 20% off working with me to help end your binge eating, overeating, your emotional eating, and get you into the body you want to be in, to lose the weight for good. If you've been considering working with me, now is the time. I offer 4 online plans that you can take a look at on my website, heatherheinen.com, under the services tab. And then under that, it would be the choose a plan for weight loss and health coaching. That's where it lists all the plans that I offer. There's 4 of them, all with different components and all for different values. And for example, plan 1 is contact weekly via email for weekly check-ins, accountability, and you get a new plan every week to help you follow each week and access to me throughout the week. And much more that goes along with that plan that you can read about on the website. But typically this plan is $219 per month. But as a podcast listener and 20% off, your cost is $176 per month. It's a really big savings. I've never done it before, but I don't think we've ever been in a economy like this before. So I offer other plans that are even less in money and will also reflect that 20% discount if you are a podcast listener. I also have lowered my one-on-one phone coaching sessions to $85 for a 50 to 55 minute session. And I am now offering a 25 to 30 minute session, which I've never offered before, for $50. I'm hoping that by trying to meet you all where you are at, where many of us are at in this new economy, that you can still get the help you know can help you get you going again, keep you accountable, and get you the results for life that you have been struggling for so long. I know the struggle with binge eating, emotional eating, overeating, as well as that yo-yo dieting cycle and the shame of losing and then gaining over and over, not to mention the exhaustion behind all that. And I really can help you change this and create that food freedom life and get you into the body you want to be in and make it sustainable. This offer will go on for the next month or so. We are right now in July. So I'm thinking the next month, maybe into August. I'm not sure yet. So if you've been wanting to get some coaching and help to lose the weight for good, get in touch now. You can email me at info@heatherheinen.com. Remember, Heinen is spelled Heynen. And in that email, let me know that you're a podcast listener in order to receive the discount. Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here and listening. Without you, this podcast would not be happening. So I really appreciate you being here and listening. Hopefully you caught the promo at the top of the show as I'm offering discounts on my service prices to podcast listeners. So if you didn't listen, rewind and listen to that, how you can get in touch with me and get 20% off what I typically charge. So it's a really, really good deal. All right. So most of you out there and me as well have had lots of food rules and guidelines that we have tried to implement to get our bodies where we want them to be, or just to try to normalize our eating behaviors. And in this episode, we're going to discuss helpful food rules and guidelines and unhelpful ones, just so that you kind of understand when you are working with food rules and guidelines, how the ones you implement could really backfire and create a lot of self-sabotage. And so how to implement ones that will actually work for your goals. Over the years, I have had a plethora of food rules during my binging and restricting episodes, dieting in general. However, those rules were not consistent throughout the entire time. They changed sporadically and were kind of all over the place when I look back over my entire history. So I know that happens for a lot of my clients as well, and probably you as well. They just change. So one prominent set of rules for me revolved around calories for quite a while. I experimented with various limits, 1,200, 1,500, 1,800, even 800 at a time, and hoped that one of these numbers would magically halt my binging and overeating and restricting and give me the body that I wanted. And as a side note, I also had lots of rules around working out, miles I needed to run in order to eat a certain amount of calories. And I know some of you out there also implement rules like this as well, which does fall under the term food rules. So then there were rules governing what I like to call joy foods or happy foods, whether to consume them daily, weekly, or exclusively, only when in the company of others. I've even imposed like time restrictions on eating and identified certain foods as off limits. I established rules about what I would eat the day following a binge. I just created so many rules, hoping they would help me overcome binge eating and restriction and achieve the body I was always looking to get. I know many of you also establish food rules with really good intentions. Perhaps, you do it out of fear of binging or of weight gain, or the belief that a specific combination of eating rules are going to prevent binging episodes or overeating episodes. But here's the reality. Those rules don't actually exist. It's true that some people find relief from binge eating, from overeating, when they modify their eating habits by eating enough and not excluding the foods they enjoy. They manage to curb their binging episodes. This approach does work for some individuals, but not for everyone, which included myself. So I attempted these strategies only to find that my binging and overeating persisted and sometimes would even get worse. The problem laid in the fact that my brain was still wired for binging and overeating. So changing my food choices did not eliminate the urges or really equip me with effective strategies to handle them. So while eating enough and allowing oneself to enjoy desired foods is crucial, it is part of that process of ending binging behavior for good, ending overeating behavior for good, rewiring the brain is just as important. So in this episode, I'm not going to get into the topic of rewiring the brain. We've talked about it in other episodes. So I'm just going to kind of get refocused here on the food rules that you set for yourself. So you establish these rules with really good intentions, hoping they will help you out. Unfortunately, most of the time they will backfire and then worsen the situation. So you may have heard people advocate for abandoning food rules, just saying they're super harmful. However, I do believe that food rules, or I like to call them guidelines, can be beneficial if they are established in a helpful manner, meaning it's how you think about them. What isn't helpful is setting rules that create feelings in you of, either being excessively hungry or feelings of being deprived. So setting rules that you don't genuinely want to follow will lead to resentment, dread, or a sense of obligation. And who wants to experience those emotions day after day? That's exhausting. Strictly adhering to rules you've set, or then feeling guilty for not following them. And this was me for so long. And I know so many of you experience this as well. And it is truly miserable. So for example, I personally struggled with calorie counting for a while. And while part of me appreciated the sense of control and certainty it provided, a larger part of me really hated the process itself. And it was hard for me with the uncertainty when calories weren't readily available, like when I was eating out or going to someone's home to eat or, now this was a long time ago. There are restaurants that provide that calorie information, but back in the day they didn't. So during most of my binging and restricting years, I couldn't get that information at restaurants like you kind of can now. But mentally calculating and doing math was not how I wanted to spend my mental energy and focus. Now, I will say, for some people, and for some of us in different seasons of our lives, this can totally work. Doing the calorie thing, some people find it just freeing and easy, and that is awesome. If it works for you, that is great. And I do sometimes use that with certain clients where we kind of figure out, hey, you are kind of the person that this is going to work for. But for me, eventually entering my food into calorie counting websites or apps multiple times a day really became tiresome. Especially there were times where it was just confusing and just time consuming. So I would encounter discrepancies in calorie counts or kind of run into uncertainty regarding the weight or quantity of the food I consumed. And then, in my head, this was compromising accuracy. So it was just all these thoughts about it that were exhausting. So as a result, I stopped counting calories, and the drawbacks of having calorie rules outweighed the benefits for me. Again, for some people, this totally works, and that's awesome. But for me, it didn't. So moreover, I now feel in control and certain without engaging in calorie counting. And that really is the beauty of it all. That's the freedom. So whatever you believe you gain from having food rules, you can achieve those benefits without them. And that's what I meant when I said food rules just don't really exist. They're not really a reality. So counting calories did not provide me with a sense of control and certainty, which I thought it was, but it didn't. It was really my thoughts about calorie counting that influenced my feelings. So nowadays, my thoughts about my chosen way of eating grant me those same desired emotions. I think in ways about the way I eat and create feelings of control and certainty with how I think and without logging anything. Now, I have to say that there can be seasons or times when I do go back to logging food, and it can be really helpful. And also, if you've never done it before, that can be really helpful because it really helps you. It gives you an education, what foods contain, how much energy, how much food contains this energy. So if you've never done it before, it can be really an important education. Can give us that education on calorie and macro content of food. And this knowledge can help us make better choices that work better for our goals. But the ultimate goal, and where I get my clients to, is eating the way they want to eat and being in the body they want to be in without logging and tracking. Okay, so let's look at another common food rule. Prohibiting certain foods in the house, right? So I remember creating lists of foods I refused to buy, considering them off limits. Periodically, I would get really frustrated with myself and establish yet another list of forbidden foods. And I believe this approach established useful boundaries that prevented binge episodes or overeating episodes, as I was blaming those foods for triggering them. However, this method ultimately left me feeling deprived since I genuinely desired to enjoy those foods. I really wanted to have those joy or happy foods. It also led to this one last time mentality where I would break my rule and indulge excessively, believing I would resume following the rule indefinitely, starting the next day, right? Like, there's always tomorrow. I'll do it tomorrow. Additionally, it didn't eliminate my desire for those foods, requiring me to rely on willpower to resist them, which, remember a few episodes back, willpower is not going to work. So moreover, it really gave me this fear surrounding those foods. And it really created more desire for these foods. And that's kind of how it backfires. I really thought that by designating these foods as off limits, and it was namely chocolate, by the way, chocolate and peanut butter, that I would prevent binging episodes. However, it just was not the case. Countless food options were available to me. And if I experienced urges, I would simply turn to other alternatives and add whatever I binged on to the ever-growing list of, no more, no more, no more. If I had continued that approach, I cannot imagine how many foods would have been included on that list. Probably dozens of foods that I really desired, but convinced myself I couldn't have. So I encourage you to examine all the food and eating rules you have established for yourself. Do they genuinely benefit you and align with your desires? If yes, cool. But if not, it's really time to let them go. And I do get that this can be really scary, as you might perceive these rules as providing safety and control. However, you can experience safety and control without them. And to achieve that, you need to recognize why these rules are not beneficial for you and why you no longer wish to follow them. And once you realize their disadvantages outweigh any perceived benefits, you will be more inclined to let them go. After all, why would you continue to uphold rules that no longer serve you? And I mentioned earlier, not all food rules are negative. I'm not suggesting that you get rid of all rules or guidelines and act impulsively without any rational thought about your eating habits. I believe food guidelines can be very valuable. Similar to guidelines in other aspects of life, they provide helpful guidelines and direct your actions towards desired outcomes. They serve as boundaries you establish because you believe they are in your best interest. So just like when we talk about being the wise parent, we set limits and guidelines for our kids to help them, not to hinder them. And that's what we want to do. We want to look for food guidelines that help us that don't hinder us. So let's consider the rule, no running at the pool, right? Or no running on the side of the pool rule. And I was just thinking that as I worked as a lifeguard in high school. And this rule aimed to prevent kids from slipping, falling, hurting themselves. And although the kids might not have appreciated it, the benefits of the rule outweighed any downsides. Another example, I have a personal bedtime rule or guideline, as I like to call it, before bed. And I have a pretty strict bedtime for myself, and the advantages of adhering to that guideline of my bedtime outweigh any disadvantages. It aligns with my desires and supports my well-being and makes me feel good. So to this day, I still maintain food guidelines for myself. In fact, I believe nearly everyone you know has their own set of guidelines too. If you were to ask someone about their eating habits, they would likely say, give like a general answer about their meals or their meal timing, their food preferences, or they might even say, I eat whatever I feel like. Those are all personal food guidelines. So I've established guidelines for myself regarding meals, timing, and food choices, and they don't hinder my life. That is key. If anything, they enhance it because I've designed those guidelines in a way that really nourishes my body and helps me feel my best. And this is what I help my clients figure out, what their personal food guidelines are that feel effortless and at the same time get them to their goals. So within my program for my clients and for myself, I view our chosen way of eating as a structured approach and guidelines rather than a set of restrictive rules. And this structure has become just my natural way of eating through consistent practice, and it involves guidelines that I established because I genuinely wanted to, right? It doesn't leave me feeling excessively hungry. It doesn't eliminate any particular foods as off limits. However, there are certain foods I choose to consume less frequently due to their effects on my body. So I create guidelines around those foods because I want to, not because I feel obligated to. And that is the key. So really crafting your own ideal way of eating, setting guidelines you genuinely want to follow, and incorporating them into your life are vital steps in healing your relationship with food and overcoming binge eating and overeating and emotional eating. From the beginning of my program for clients, I guide them in designing their individualized eating structures and establishing guidelines that will support them in overcoming binge eating and overeating. And I encourage you to do the same for yourself. Take a close look at the food rules you have set and determine which ones you no longer want or find useful. And at the same time, identify the guidelines you genuinely desire and work to start practicing implementing them immediately. However, I cannot emphasize enough that you must ensure that your guidelines incorporate enough food to prevent feeling deprived throughout the day, because that's a whole other matter. When we are starving ourselves and restricting too much, that creates a whole cascade of hormonal issues that are going to drive urges and cravings and overeating and all those things. So you have to ensure your guidelines give you enough food to prevent feeling deprived throughout the day. And your guidelines can be whatever you want them to be. They are your personal boundaries, guidelines, and decisions based on what you genuinely desire for yourself, and they can reflect the reasons behind your choices and the results you wish to achieve. If your current rules do not align with your desires or they're not giving you the desired outcomes or results, then you probably need to do some experimenting and adjust and fine-tune them. Remember, they are your guidelines. So create your own ideal way of eating, letting go of anything that no longer serves you well. This is really, really possible. That food freedom, living in the body you want to be in without restriction, without struggle. If you have tried some things but it's not working, get in touch. I really can help get you there. If you found something valuable in this episode, would you consider leaving a review on the platform you're listening to? Those reviews really help the algorithms so that more people can find my podcast and I can keep pumping out these episodes every week. Thank you for listening and being here, and we will talk soon. Did you know you can find a lot more help from me on my website? Go to heatherheynen.com. Heynen is spelled Heynen, and get in touch with questions on all things I offer, like online courses for overeating, weight loss, goal attainment, and also my coaching and counseling services. Just a reminder that this podcast represents my own opinions. The content here should not be taken as medical advice. The content here is for educational and informational purposes only. Please consult your doctor or healthcare professional for any individual medical questions you may have.